July 2026 is a month that serious astrologers have had circled on their calendars for years, if not decades. What's coming is an outer planet configuration so tight and so rare that I genuinely can't find anything like it in history. But before we get there, let's look at what June delivers. The middle of June saw a highly benefic conjunction of Venus and Jupiter in Cancer, of which I said this last month. Don't be greedy. Although, if there were ever a moment for greed, it would be here. And funnily enough, some might say that we saw the very apogee of greed as the world witnessed the minting of its first trillionaire, who just so happens to be a Cancer rising. On Friday, the 12th of June, Elon Musk became the world's first trillionaire following the IPO of SpaceX. Elon has the classic signature of great wealth in his natal chart, a Jupiter-Pluto aspect. In his chart, Jupiter and Pluto are in a sextile at 27 degrees of Scorpio and Virgo, respectively. And on the day he reached trillionaire status, Jupiter was at 26 Cancer, Venus at 28 Cancer, triggering that great wealth aspect almost exactly with a highly benefic trine to Jupiter. And I think that conjunction was also at work for a certain US president. On June the 14th, it was announced that a peace deal between the US and Iran had been reached, ending military operations, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and lifting the naval blockade on Iranian ports. Last month, I said this: the US President Donald Trump will probably be in a very good mood around the time of this conjunction, as it will be right on his Venus at 25 Cancer. I could see him announcing some kind of huge trade deal around this time. Now, we weren't looking at a pure trade deal. It was a peace deal with a lot of trade involved, but I wasn't too far off. And Trump really was celebrating. It was his 80th birthday on June the 14th, in honor of which an entire UFC event was held on the very lawn of the White House itself. Now, the deal came at the time of a new moon in Gemini. Cast for Washington, D.C., the lunation chart had Venus on the descendant opposing Pluto. I said it would bring intense peace negotiations, but it actually brought the deal itself. In a chart of this kind, Venus on the descendant is a good sign for peace, although I wasn't sure it would deliver an actual deal since Venus is peregrine in that part of Leo. But Jupiter was just 4 degrees from the descendant and in its own sign of exaltation, Cancer, close enough to pull its weight too. And so I think that two benefics on the descendant of one of the major belligerents in this lunation chart brought a peace deal. That's worth noting as a case study. But I have to be honest, I was off the mark elsewhere. I thought Uranus square the lunar node would bring more volatility in June than it actually did. We'd seen how these configurations tend to coincide with major disasters, conflicts, and sudden shocks and turnarounds. Didn't really deliver on those expectations. Astrology is a stochastic art. We never get certainty, and sometimes when we're expecting challenging events and we're wrong, that's a very good thing. The important thing is that when forecasts miss the mark, we try to figure out why. My best guess is that perhaps the tight structure of the current minor grand trine of outer planets is somehow stabilizing Uranus and holding back its more chaotic manifestations. As for the long-term consequences of what just happened in the Gulf, it's going to take years for shipping to return to previous levels, and damaged facilities mean that the world won't return to its previous energy output for a long time. When Mars and Saturn make aspects over the next couple of years, I think we'll see events that are downstream of this energy crisis, including challenges to and restructuring of the global energy economy. But whatever relative calm June offered us, July looks set to open with something much more dramatic. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do me a favor and click like, and you might even want to subscribe to the channel to make sure you catch future episodes. Thanks very much. July is probably going to start with a bang. On July the 4th, we'll see a conjunction of Mars and Uranus at 3 degrees and 52 minutes of Gemini. The last time we saw one of these was mid-July 2024 at the time of the Butler event, something I talked about in this recent video. These conjunctions bring fast-acting, shocking events and very often violence. What's particularly interesting is how this conjunction is dialed in to the outer planet configuration of July. It's in a trine with Pluto and a sextile with Neptune. So I suspect that whatever we see could be the result of covert action, intelligence agency scheming, where what appears on the surface isn't quite what it seems. One of the key places to watch is Cuba. As astrologer Wade Caves pointed out on this channel, the solar eclipse of August the 12th points to Cuba as facing significant change, potentially even regime change. The longtime socialist-ruled island is already under heavy pressure, and the Trump administration has made it clear that it's in the firing line. The Mars-Uranus conjunction falls on the IC of the chart for the current Diaz-Canel government. So expect surprising, fast-moving events that disrupt the situation there around July the 4th. And despite the peace deal, I don't think Iran's troubles are over. Israel wasn't party to that agreement and has achieved none of its objectives. I'll be digging into the astrology of what comes next for Iran in the members-only bonus section of this video. The picture there is quite specific. Now, let's talk about Venus, because the planet of love is in for something of a rocky July, in my opinion. July may be a relatively challenging month for love and relational matters. Venus starts the month in Leo, not a sign she thrives in. It's a little too concerned with the self and with recognition to serve as fertile ground for the pleasant, selfless unions that Venus asks for. Then on July the 6th, she enters the sign of her fall, Virgo, where she'll stay until August the 6th. Things are never quite as comfortable as Venus wants them in Virgo. There's always something slightly wrong, something that could be improved, something that could be more beautiful or pleasurable. The upside is that this is good energy for attending to those improvements, but the first stretch of that transit may be a bit difficult. When Venus enters Virgo, she immediately conjoins the South Node exact on July the 11th. The South Node represents excretion, the shedding of what no longer serves. So this is a difficult signature for human relations. You may find certain relationships and friendships lacking at this time. Then Venus runs into a square with Uranus and Gemini. Venus-Uranus hard aspects inject demands for authenticity and freedom into partnerships. Given that Venus is already a bit unhappy in Virgo, this could put real pressure on relationships that aren't worth the effort. For those that are solid, the Venus-Uranus energy is best harnessed by changing things up, doing something genuinely different and exciting together. The Venus-Mars square goes exact on July the 29th, but it's within orb from around the 21st. Venus-Mars squares bring a lot of desire, but also instability, capricious, sometimes scandalous energy. And with the ruler of Venus being a retrograde Mercury throughout, communication issues will compound things. If someone doesn't text back, take a breath before calling everything off. That retrograde Mercury is going to be worth bearing in mind over the course of July, by the way. Mercury doesn't station direct until July the 24th. Expect technical problems, difficulty in communicating, trading, and being forced to do things multiple times. I think you know the drill. So keep all that in mind for your personal life, because on the world stage, there's a lunation coming that could shake things up economically in a very significant way. On July the 14th, we get a new moon in Cancer, the moon's own sign. This is a seeding moment in the realm of care, protection, nurture, and bounded spaces of identity, the home, the clan, the homeland. This new moon is quite tightly conjunct retrograde Mercury, which could mean some confusion or delays around whatever seeds are planted. But there's something else. We have a natal chart for the US Federal Reserve, and it has its ascendant at 18 Cancer and Mars at 19 Cancer, right where the new moon and retrograde Mercury will be. So it's safe to say that the Fed is being triggered into action somehow by this new moon and events in the month that follows it. What's more, the lunation's triggering Mercury, planet of trade, in the 8th house of debt and investment in the US Sibley chart. That's another signature that suggests this moon is bringing big financial news. And if you cast the chart for Washington, D.C., the moon will appear on the ascendant. I'm not a financial astrologer, so I can't be more specific than this, but I have a feeling this new moon is seeding some highly significant economic or financial news related to the United States. And that new moon is really just the aperitif. What comes next is the main event of July, the configuration that's had astrologers talking for a very long time. July is a pivotal month, one a lot of astrologers have been eyeing for many years, if not decades, because of an extraordinary outer planet configuration. I've cast a chart for July the 20th, and by this point we have in play what my friend S.J. Anderson has been calling the basket, an aspect pattern, also known as a cradle. I already did a two-part live stream on this astrology, so I don't want to repeat everything here. But the headline is that the aspects that comprise this configuration will go exact in very quick succession. On July the 15th, Uranus makes an exact sextile with Neptune. July the 18th, Uranus makes an exact trine with Pluto. On July the 20th, Jupiter and Pluto form an exact opposition. And on July the 25th, Pluto and Neptune make an exact sextile. This is fairly unprecedented. I can't find any comparable example where these aspects are this tight almost simultaneously. In my view, this astrology represents the emergence of digital technocracy. All around the world, new technologies are being rolled out that, when connected, will serve to create new forms of society managed by AI and digital technology. And this is what's often called the digital control grid. And it has a lot of people with their eyes open pretty concerned, and I'm one of them. What's more, there's a strong Gemini flavor to this astrology, this basket. Uranus is in that sign, and the current Pluto-Neptune cycle began in Gemini too. In my framework, Pluto-Neptune is kind of the master cycle. Gemini, sign of the twins, is naturally the sign of division and doubling. This is why bifurcations are so characteristic of this moment in time. Think of the new Cold War between the US and China, left versus right, nationalist versus globalist, and perhaps most significantly, the emergent transhumanist technocracy against all those who oppose it. The 500-year Pluto-Neptune cycle we're living through now began in the 1890s, and its themes run through the 20th century and up to today. So far, this cycle has already seen many failed experiments in totalitarianism. I suspect we're on the brink of seeing another one, this time powered by digital tech. And so, unfortunately, I don't think all that stuff is going anywhere for now. And I think we all need to be thinking hard about what we can accept, what we can't, and where our red lines are. But I don't think it serves us to only focus on the negatives either. The digital tools coming online now can serve as an amplifier for creative potential. Think about the movie industry. What this technology will do is allow individual creators to make entire films dependent solely on their imagination, bypassing the gatekeeping and nepotism that kept the doors shut on most people. There's a kid sitting somewhere in the world right now who's going to make something extraordinary because of it. But coming back to the Pluto-Neptune cycle, we're in the final phase of the century-long sextile. The most comparable historical period is the High Renaissance in the 16th century, when Copernicus's heliocentric theory was published and great splits in human society were becoming visible. Europe was dividing by faith. The Spanish were conquering the Incas, and the so-called New World was revealed alongside the Old. I think July will show strong signs of technocracy's emergence as well as opposition to it. But within the basket configuration, one aspect in particular stands out as having the most immediate real-world implications, especially if you care about money. The Jupiter-Pluto opposition deserves particular attention because it could signify significant real-world events, especially in the financial markets. Jupiter and Pluto in combination is the signature of great ambition and big money. Their three conjunctions in Capricorn in 2020 coincided with an enormous corporate bailout when the Fed chose to rescue corporations while small businesses were smashed. Massive inflation was the consequence that we're all still living with. At the Jupiter-Pluto square of May 2023, we saw the second largest bank failure in US history when the FDIC seized First Republic Bank and enabled a forced sale to JP Morgan Chase, sweetened with $50 billion in financing. This Jupiter-Pluto opposition is specifically across the Leo-Aquarius axis. The last one was September the 2nd, 1789. The very day that George Washington approved the founding of the US Treasury. Talk about a vivid demonstration of this aspect's connection to big money there. 1789 was, of course, the year of the French Revolution. I doubt we'll see anything like that in July, but the historical echo is worth noting. But given that the opposition forms part of a larger signature of societal emergence, I suspect events in July will feed into the rollout of the digital financial architecture being built right now. Stablecoins, central bank digital currencies, AI, etc. One possibility suggested to me by a recent client is a so-called bail-in somewhere down the line. Rather than public money propping up failed banks, depositors could have their funds confiscated in exchange for shares. I don't know if July brings anything like that, but I have a strong feeling that sooner or later, we're going to see an event whose solution is the distribution of digital tokens, sold as a necessary rescue of the financial system. More generally, I could see major headlines in July about extreme AI valuations, mega deals, and the fortunes accumulating around the visible figures running tech firms. Perhaps this month will be seen in future as some kind of market high watermark, because this scenario with US federal debt approaching the size of the entire economy, alongside soaring markets and continued high inflation, surely can't go on forever. But the month doesn't end there. It ends with a full moon that may be the most extraordinary lunation of the entire year. On July the 29th, a full moon appears at 6 degrees and 30 minutes for Aquarius, and it's one of the more remarkable moons I've seen in a long time. First of all, the lunation comes at the time of a Jupiter Cazimi, Jupiter's exact conjunction with the Sun. Cazimi meaning as if in the heart was considered a moment of empowerment, as if the planet reaches the throne room. Jupiter, planet of faith, wealth, and great size, is raised up at this moment, along with the things that it signifies. At the same time, the moon will be conjunct Pluto. She's separating and more than 2 degrees away, but there's still going to be a strong Plutonian quality to this lunation. Pluto signifies hidden underworld power and, crucially, its revelation. At a full moon, which is already a moment of revelation anyway, we can expect something that was hidden to come to light. This conjunction also dials the lunation directly into the basket configuration we've already talked about. These themes, emergent financial systems, multipolarity, technocracy, are going to be loud in the 2 weeks following this full moon. Pay close attention to what's making headlines and what's going viral. It's all going to be very telling about the future. Before we go, my next live stream is Apocalypse 2040, happening on Saturday, the 27th of June at 9 a.m. Eastern. Some of the most powerful people in the world are building bunkers. Are they hedging their bets, or do they know something that we don't? We're going to look at that from every angle, including, of course, the astrology. YouTube correspondent tier members and website members are already in. Everyone else can grab a ticket on the live streams page of my site. The link is in the description, or you can become a member. And website members, you also have monthly electional astrology waiting for you on the forum of my website. And now, before we go, a brief note on August, which is an eclipse month with the slightly unreal feeling that that always brings. The thing to bear in mind is that eclipses come into effect weeks ahead of time. I think the solar eclipse in Leo on August the 12th will have big implications for Cuba, Russia, Ukraine, and Indonesia, among other places. And we could be seeing early effects of it in July already. More on that next month. Now, for members, let's get into the real astrological detail, because Iran's recent tribulations are far from over, I'm afraid, and the charts are telling a very specific story about what's coming next.